Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. As Farhan said, we have with us Gary Conille, who is UNICEF's Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we mentioned it very briefly at the noon briefing. He will talk to you about a report launched on the changing face of child migration in Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Conille, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Conille, and I am the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean with UNICEF. Today, I have the distinct privilege of unveiling the latest UNICEF Child Alert Report, focusing on the evolving migration patterns of children and families in Latin America and the Caribbean. The purpose of our gathering is twofold. First, to highlight these critical findings, and second, to underscore the urgency of the situation we are facing. The report unveils a stark and alarming reality. Children are now migrating within Latin America and the Caribbean at an unprecedented rate, constituting a larger share of the migrant population than any other region worldwide. While migration is certainly not a novel phenomenon in our region, it has undergone a profound transformation over the past decade. The situation confronting children on the move in Latin America and the Caribbean is unparalleled in its complexity and scale, demanding immediate attention and decisive action. In my role as regional director, I have had the privilege of meeting children and families who have embarked on harrowing journeys. Their stories are a poignant reminder of the challenges we actually face. From South Africa to North America, from the Caribbean to Central America, an increased number of children have left behind their homes, their schools, their friends, and their communities. Notably, younger children are now undertaking these treacherous journeys with their families, a stark departure from the past. The impact of this evolving trend is felt in every corner of our region, with different countries serving as places of origin, transit, and destination, sometimes simultaneously. The driving forces behind child migration are numerous and complex, encompassing factors such as rampant gang violence, the escalating effects of climate change, and exacerbated inequalities and poverty magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdowns. The children I met shared their arduous journey, spanning multiple borders and modes of travel, from cars and boats to trucks and trains, but more often than not, on foot. Last June, I visited the perilous Darien jungle situated between Colombia and Panama, an unforgiving terrain characterized by dense forests, rushing rivers, treacherous hills, and vast swamps. I witnessed firsthand the challenges faced by migrant children and their families, and I'm still very much remembering the conversation I had with this very young family, traveling with a toddler. And of course, the husband was carrying the toddler, must be less than 1 year old, and everything else he can carry, and his wife holding on to them. And at a certain point, they're crossing a river, and the wife doesn't know how to swim, and the current takes the wife away. And the husband has to make the strategic decision, what do? Do I drop the child to save my wife, or do I keep the child and watch my wife drown? Fortunately for him, another person who was traveling drops everything she has, takes the child, and he's able to save his wife. 2 days after the incident, he was still in shock, and he described it to me as one of the most traumatic moments of his life. So this is a very significant challenge for the people who decide to go down this route. And in the first half of 2023 alone, over 40,000 children have crossed the perilous Darien Gap on their journey towards North America, matching the record number from the entire year of 2022. Many of these children have endured loss, be it of belongings, documents, and sometimes even family members. Now, these heart-wrenching scenes are repeated throughout the region and unfortunately throughout the year. Moreover, the profiles of child migrants is evolving, with children under 11 years of age now comprising up to 91% of all children on the move at select key transit points. This shift presents unique challenges to national migration policies and humanitarian response, necessitating tailored services such as breastfeeding space, for example. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, Migrant and refugee children often encounter significant obstacles when attempting to access essential services critical for their well-being. Many miss out on education, proper health care, and protection, both during their journey and upon arrival at their destination. These challenges can have long-lasting physical and psychosocial repercussions that may hinder their full development and potential. So, in the face of this multifaceted and far-reaching crisis, what can we do? Well, first, it is an imperative to recognize that children on the move and their families possess rights and specific needs, regardless of the reason for their departure or their legal status. A child remains a child, irrespective of their circumstance. In partnership with governments and civil society organizations, UNICEF is actively engaged in providing life-saving assistance and support to migrants, refugees, and displaced children across 20 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Critical areas such as education, health, and child protection systems in both transit and host countries are essential for their growth and development. Second, we must also all realize that while child migration is often perceived as a challenge, it actually does present opportunities to contribute to increased growth, stability, and prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. Member states in the region can and should take specific actions to safeguard the rights, safety, and well-being of migrants and refugee children. This includes enhancing access to services, preventing and addressing violence, investing in child-sensitive border reception and services, ensuring access to legal identity and regularized status, and of course, promoting integration and participation. Third, child migration in Latin America and the Caribbean transcends national boundaries. It is a continental issue that demands a unified response. All countries in the region can and must work collaboratively to address this multifaceted challenge. States should strive to mobilize a regional approach to international protection and tackle the root causes of child migration. This approach should recognize the interconnected nature of migration movements and policy responses in the region and expand safe and regular migration pathways for children and families, including mechanisms for family reunification, all while upholding the right to territorial assignment. Now, regrettably, there is no indication that child migration in Latin America and the Caribbean will abate in a foreseeable future. On the contrary, if the root causes such as gang violence, poverty, and climate change remain unaddressed, we may witness even more children and families undertaking perilous transcontinental journeys. I extend really my heartfelt thanks for your attention, and I'm of course eager to respond to any questions you may have. I hope you will find our report extremely useful.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Conille. I'm Alejandro Rincon with NTN 24, international news channel from Latin America, and I have two follow-ups. First, could you share with us a little bit more of your thoughts on that heart-wrenching scene that personally shook you and moved you as you were in the Darien Gap? What was your overall feeling about this very terrible human tragedy that is unfolding down there? And second, on the risks that children are facing there, is there an issue in particular that do you think governments in the region should pay attention a lot more? For example, unaccompanied minors being vulnerable to human trafficking. Is there any issue in particular that do you think is the one that should tackle first? Because of course this is very complex and there's a lot of things to resolve there. So.
Well, thank you for both questions. You know, I'm a father of twin daughters, and I've been married for 28 years, and I pray that I never find myself in a circumstance where you have to make such a decision. And to see a grown man 2 years later really in a state, reliving the moment is actually something you tend to remember. His description of that fraction of a second was really amazing. You know, he lost all his papers, including the birth certificate of his child, a passport. So he was dealing with all his money. So at the same moment he was dealing with a tragic situation he had lived very recently, he also needed to find solutions for the actual problems he has. And this is a situation, I guess, he would tell you if he were here, that I consider myself completely lucky because the group that was in front of him, they had actually gangs and armed groups, and they had been victimized in other way. So it is one of these things that stay with you, and that certainly reinforce our commitment to do everything we can to help children under these circumstances. On the issue of what we should prioritize, we have the resources and the knowledge to be able to actually address these issues in a comprehensive way. We know what to do, and we actually know how to do it. Right now, the funding request we have to be able to address in a comprehensive way this whole issue, we're at less than 30% of our needs. With a little bit more help and support, we can do much more to protect and help these children and make sure that there's some continuity in a life that's been at a very early stage, so much disturbed, I would say. And that would be my best answer. In the case of children that are living through these circumstances, we need to do everything we can do. No prioritization here. We need to make sure from beginning to end we're providing them with every level of support we can.
Do we have any? Yeah, Kristen.
Can you tell me, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but I don't think you did, the difference between, how many of these children are traveling with parents and how many are traveling on their own?
So what we've seen is that the first point, which is very important, is that we're seeing an increase in the number of children traveling. The second point is we're seeing an increase in the number of children that are below 11 that are traveling. The third element is we're seeing a bigger proportion of children that are traveling alone. So the three dimensions are what actually worries us. I have the exact numbers, and I can actually share it with you to make sure that I'm not telling you things that, don't. And you'll find, of course, the actual numbers in the report, but I do want to make sure that I give you the exact numbers that we have. If not, I'll make sure you get them after this briefing, because we do have them.
Let's take another question while you look. Stefano.
Thank you for this briefing. How those children, you mentioned why these people are moving, right? So would you consider them refugees or migrants?
I think that's a very interesting question. From our perspective as UNICEF, it doesn't matter. The reality is these are children that are exposed, in danger, and that require our assistance. Obviously, some of them are leaving their communities because they're fleeing poverty. Others are fleeing because there was a climate event and they've lost everything they had. Some are fleeing with their families as political refugees. Independent of the reason for which they have to leave their communities, these are children that are exposed and in a high level of danger. How we treat them should be standard, systematic, and certainly the same. So that's as far as I would go. I'm not sure that from our perspective, it's important for us to differentiate, what category they fall under. Because obviously, in the example I just gave you, when they're crossing that river, they're as exposed as any other child that would be in these circumstances.
I'm sorry, just to follow up. The reason why I ask is because there will be a difference, substantial difference in the way those states during this journey have to provide for this. So I don't know if you can answer, but the UNICEF, that's why I ask for UNICEF, wouldn't help these people if UNICEF will push for consider as those children, the most of those children, refugees?
Right, no, thank you, and I understand the question. I guess what I'm trying to say is when we deploy our assets to be able to support, protect, and ensure services to these children, that's not a question we ask. Every child that will be in the circumstances deserving of our help and support. And that differentiation is not helpful in any way from our perspective, right? And when you visit the Darien, and I went to centers where I saw children playing in our safe spaces, or getting health care, or being handled by some of our colleagues, my first question is not, is this an asylum baby, or is this a refugee baby, or what's important, and I think that's the point we want to make, is that all these children are deserving of our support. The second point, of course, is that governments should do everything in their power to make sure that we have this transcontinental approach to making sure that these children are protected and have access to basic services throughout the journey. The third point we're making is that the push factors that lead to this type of very dangerous migration also need to be addressed. So no matter why a child is forced to leave his or her community, we need to make sure that we're also addressing those. So if we can have this comprehensive approach, including integration for the children that do join new communities, I think we will have served our purpose. Thank you so much.
Do we have other questions? No? So I think, were you able to find that number you were looking for?
Yes, and
Yes.
with numbers, I really want to make sure I'm giving you the exact number, and that's why I wanted to be careful. So I can tell you, for example, in fiscal year 2021, 149,000 children crossed the U.S. border. This is U.S. data. In 2022, it was 155,000 children, and just for the first 2 trimesters of 2023, we have 83,000 children that crossed the border, and that's the source here. And I will also make sure, and you'll find them in the report, very detailed information about the numbers that we have.
Sorry, what was 2022?
So again, this is numbers that we're getting from the United States Customs and Border Protection. In 2021, we had 149,000 children crossing. When you compare that to 2022, we had 155,000. And for the first 7 months of 2023, we are already at 83,000. And of course, we have for the Darien as well. I just want to be careful with numbers.
And the report is titled The Changing Face of Child Migration in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's online, it's on UNICEF's website. And Mr. Conille, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate, and thank you so much to all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.